All right, so in this tutorial video, I'm going to go over how to do the circuit that was asked for you to do in the test. So it requires having to do all the exercises from earlier with Tinkercad. Watch the videos to help you out with that. So the idea is that we're going to be using an Arduino R3 board, three LEDs, and you can do whatever color you want. Uh, Four potentiometers, one RGB LED, and then two micro servo motors. So the micro servo motors are based off of exercise number 6. Programming them is not too complicated. It's actually a lot simpler than the RGB LED. So that's probably the only one that might give you the hardest time. Um, so in this tutorial video, I'm just going to kind of explain how to go ahead and wire it. The next video will go over how to write the code for it. So the first thing to do will probably be to wire up the potentiometers, the variable resistors. And pretty much the process is very, very simple. Depending on how you wire it up will affect how your code works later on the next steps. But basically the way it will work is that the left terminals I am going to use to plug them into the 5 volts. Okay, you gotta go ahead and spend a little bit of time to make sure the wires are nice and neat, so that way to minimize the confusion. So all the left legs go to 5 volts. There we go. Then the right side of the potentiometers, so the right legs, they're all going to go to ground. And what I'll also do is I'll change the color so that way it makes it a little bit less confusing. And also I'm going to kind of stack them on top of each other just so that it's not cluttered looking. Okay, so basically you want to think of this as kind of like just like a sink. So you got water coming in from the red, goes through, and then goes out to the black. So that's kind of like the drain. And then basically the wiper, which is the leg in the middle, are what we're going to use to determine how much water is flowing at any given time. And so what I'm going to do is, because it's a variable measurement or variable input, it's not on or off, that's going to be an analog input. So I'm going to go ahead and put this to A1, 2, 3, and 4. All I'll also do is I'll change the colors to different ones so that way we can kind of help identify which one's a little bit easier. So I'll make that one orange, make that one green, and then make this one a light blue. All right, there we go. And actually, let's see if I can rearrange this a little bit neater. So one of the biggest things, if you ever plan on going to electrical engineering, when you're doing a lot of electronics and components, especially trying to wire stuff up yourself, is trying to make sure that your wiring is nice and neat. So that way, again, it's easier to understand what is going on with your circuit. The more wires, the more complicated it gets, and the more messier it is, it's harder to understand what's going on. Yeah, there we go. All right, so that's the 4 analog resistors. So again, left side I'm putting it at 5 volts, right side goes to ground, and in the middle one's a 1, 2, 3, and 4. As I mentioned before, depending on which side is which one's 5 volts, which one's ground, will determine how your code behaves. Nothing too dramatic, but that's just something to be aware of. So if you wire up your circuits and it behaves a little bit differently, most likely is because they're flipped backwards. Very simple fix, but sometimes also it's not really worth fixing. Okay. So with that said, let's go on and move on to the next components. So let's do our regular resistors. And what I'll do is I'll use different colors so that way I can kind of figure out which one's which. So I'll do one green, one blue, and one red. And then I'm going to add in my resistor. Now again, that's just to prevent the LEDs from getting damaged when the circuit is running. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to 220 ohms. Then I'm going to copy and paste. That's one for each LEDs. And then to save myself some time, I'm going to go ahead and copy some more for the RGB LED. So I'll put those to the side and I'll wire that later. So I'll throw that over here for now. Now with the regular LEDs, those are just simply standard voltage on or off. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and use the digital pins, and we're going to use the ones that only have the number without the squiggly line. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead, put one on 13, put one on 12, and then put one on 8. Then I'll bring those closer. So now from the resistor, I'm going to go ahead and plug those into the bent leg, the longer leg, which is your cathode or your anode, like so. And then the other legs are going to go straight to ground. And again, I'm changing colors just to make things a little bit easier to identify. I'm going to try to overlay them a little bit just to keep them organized. There we go. So that's the regular standard LEDs. They're all plugged up, ready to go. Now let's go ahead and start talking about the RGB LEDs and then afterwards the micro servo motors. Okay. So RGB LEDs, again, there's a little bit different than regular standard LEDs because we can control the values of red, green, and blue. And because they're not simply on or off, we have to do the pulse width modulation, PWM. And again, these pins are identified by the numbers with the squiggly lines to the left of them. So 11, 10, 9, 6, 5, and 3 all are pulse width modulations. So I'm going to go ahead and plug one to 11, plug one to 10, and then plug one to 9. And I will probably throw this LED. I'll put it over here. Again, I'm going to try to keep it not as cluttered as possible, kind of like a little bit more organized. So there we go. So the first one, number 11, I'm going to plug that into the red leg. Terminal 2, or actually number 10, that is going to go to my leg that's identified as blue. And number 9, that's going to go to the green leg. What I'll also do is I'll change the color of the wire so I can know which one is which. Okay. Then the second leg on the LED, or the RGB LED, is the cathode, which is a fancy way of saying the negative leg. So I'm going to go ahead and wire that to ground. There we go. So with that, the RGB LED is now wired up correctly. Again, they have to be with the numbers with the squiggly lines. If you put them with the ones without it, your LED may not behave the way it wants, or we want it to behave. All that's left to do now is the servo motors. I'm going to kind of rotate those so they're sideways, or you can kind of leave them as is. Really doesn't matter too much. So again, servo motors have 3 wires. You have ground, you have power, and then you have your signal wire. So ground, as the name implies, we're going to go ahead and connect those to your ground. So you can do that on the bottom one or on the top one. Really doesn't matter. Just for making it nice and clean, I'm going to go ahead and put it on the bottom one. Okay, so I'll do that for both servo motors. I'll back that one up a little bit. Okay, so both are hooked up to ground. Now I'm going to go ahead and plug the middle wire to my power source. So that's going to be 5 volts. So I'm going to go ahead and go all the way down to the left and then to the 5 volts. And basically the way I'm wiring it is I'm kind of extending it back so it's isolated from the rest of the wires. Again, just for visual organization. I'll also change the color wire so I know what's going where. Okay, so that's good right there. Well, the only issue is that the way it's oriented right now, it's kind of hard to see the black wire. So maybe if I rotate them. Let's clean that up some. Okay, so that's a little bit better. So now we can see each of the wires are not on top of each other. Okay, all that's left to do now is your signal wires. And the signal wire, the purpose of those is to determine the position of the plastic piece, the white servo horns. And that's going to get rotation values of 0 to 180 degrees. So because of that, we're going to use the pulse width modulations. And that's going to be, for this exercise, I'm going to put them in 6 and 5 for my servo motors. And what I'll do is I'll change the color. So I'll do orange for one, and I'll do yellow for the yellow one. So 6 and 5. And I'm just going to organize the wires a little bit, cleaning them up. And there we go. And that's how I'm going to go ahead and wire up my servo motors, my potentiometers, my LEDs, and my RGB LED.